All right. Well, here is the journey map I've created. It's a fairly long um, map. I'll kind of walk through it and show you the types of things we're talking about. You don't have to, but I use some different colors here. Again, you'll have about 10 minutes to be able to do this. So that's why I want to show you ahead of time. You have a chance to kind of begin to think and look. So if we look here at the beginning, I was born in 1960. Really, mom, dad, older brother, healthy family. One of my earliest memories is my Gammy, my grandmother dying. She lived with us. My father was an only child, and when he got married, he brought his new wife and his family into the house that he grew up in, as he was taking care of his widowed mother. So I just remember her passing away as a 4-year-old, as traumatic as that can be, but great healthy memories throughout. The biggest event for me took place here in 1974. It's my mother died. She contracted leukemia. It was just discovered in February of 1974. She passed away on April 8th of 74. It was very quick. My father very quickly he remarried. He remarried in February of 75 and met the woman who's my stepmother now in August of 75, and they began to draw up plans for, in addition to the house, she was bringing in two young children. It was just trauma on trauma as a teenager. Probably and through this whole thing, I'd put a whole lot of up and down lines just because it's what it means to be an adolescent. Through that, though, right around the time of their remarriage, I came to faith. They were married in February 75. By May of 75, a teacher at my school, a public high school science teacher, shared the gospel with me, responded, and it really began to have a huge positive effect on my life. The negative of that is here, that teacher was also an abuser. A friend of mine who also professed faith through his sharing the gospel, he sexually abused him. I was not sexually abused, but there was a lot of emotional abusive things that were going on. So that was a huge confusion, obviously, for me. Almost right up to the point of when I started dating Janet. We started dating senior in high school. Now, you'll see here in green, red is the negative. You don't know if you'll see this, not this is purple, just it dates in purple. Blue is more positive things. And as you kind of look here, so I showed this to my wife Janice. She said, you don't have any highs. I'm saying, no, my whole life is high except when it goes down. And I put marriage plan here, so we've moved over a little bit, but I started thinking marriage soon within the year or two of us dating. But we had a healthy relationship. We got married in 1982, first year of marriage, trying to figure out what's my plan. I already had been thinking, and I could have put it here. I in high school was figuring on being a pastor, and that's going to be some of these green things you'll see. My tendency to plan is very strong. So just a little confusion. First year of marriage, early 20s. What do I do? Decide, okay, I will go to seminary. Was avoiding that. Started that in 84 and 85. Our daughter came along, graduated seminary in 87, and went to Marquette University. Went there to pursue a PhD because part of my education plan was to train pastors in a non-traditional format, which is what you're going to see kind of play out later. So right around then, we had our second child, John, in 1988. We were part of a church plant, and that kind of set me into another career, not a tailspin, but just a lot of questioning that goes on. And so through that, the church plant experience was less than positive, more so because I was at this point, an arrogant 30-year-old who thought I knew a lot better. My idea again was do this non-traditional education. That's why I was at Marquette. I was writing my dissertation, but then the realization came up, two things. One, trying to fund this career was not going to work. Two, had an opportunity to be a church planter also in Milwaukee, to church plant out of this one, and recognize if I'm going to be training pastors and having never pastored, there is a problem. So that yielded into a church plan. Right as that was getting ready, realized we were expecting number 3, Michael, born in 1992. The church plant, he was May, September we really started in May of gathering, and then by September was our first public worship, and I just scribbled lines. And as you can kind of see, there's all the ups and downs of church planting. Overall, it was fairly positive, but I would find myself throughout that time in bouts of depression. Nothing really debilitating, but just a lot of self-doubt and questioning. One of the highlights was hired John. John was a classmate of mine, actually, from seminary. Really got to know him in the church plant in Milwaukee. He had gone off to be a pastor out in Pennsylvania. I hired him back to be my associate. It was great having a peer and a friend, a co-worker to work together. And that was wonderful. And this should be a longer line, because for about 2 years it went great, until in 2006 it was revealed that he had an improper relationship, had an affair, sexual relationship with a woman he was counseling. Now, she was in her 30s, he was in his 40s, pushing 50. But because he was a pastor and a counselor, he went away to prison for about overall 4 years, and was on paper for about 8 years in parole. Well, his loss obviously was hugely traumatic. Right around there, we acquired a new building, moved into that. The session began. We were all in a great deal of trauma. They were wondering, what did I do to cause all these problems? I went on sabbatical. I really crashed at that point, emotionally and spiritually. So I took a sabbatical. It was not a real healthy sabbatical. It was, again, a bit more of an emergency situation. But then as I came back to the sabbatical, well, right before sabbatical, actually, Jenny, our oldest, got married to Sam Brown. That's a highlight, of course. And then they had 3 wonderful boys. Another highlight. Throughout this period, though, from about 2002 to 2016, our middle son, well, first, it was all on the same day, actually. It was our youngest son's birthday. I got a phone call, diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The school that our son was a part of as a 7th grader, they were informing us they really didn't want him to return. They were afraid of their safety. But during this time, our middle one had many years of suicide ideation, a lot of emotional turmoil. That pretty much has resolved itself about 3 years ago. So that can be, again, an up. In 2016, started the On Wisconsin Network. Youngest got married, Michael and Emma, in 2016. And then in 2017-18, really was launched in 18, was NXTGEN Pastors. The whole plan was taking place here. This plan is all a part of that church plan and that educational plan down there. There is a long line of thinking about what I'm doing here that goes way back. So that's the real quick overview of it all. What I would suggest is, in order for us to really get to know and share these stories, try to move this back just enough so we can see the whole thing, is it's great to point out what are these highs and lows, and how do they affect us as pastors. That is, there is a repeated pattern here, as you're going to see a little bit with grandmother dying, mother dying, my father's remarriage, this abuse at the hands of the man that led me to Christ. And then as well as this and my son and how it ended at Cornerstone, the pattern here is, it really sets me up for a lot of fear. Fear of man, fear of abandonment. And so what I'll do in my relationships, what I'll do here in the context of the church, I'll do anything to keep you close, to keep you from leaving. I live in fear of that. And I really didn't recognize that until I began to think through some of these events and looking at this whole pattern in my life. Likewise, there are some idols here. I am a really good planner. Janet kind of found out that we were going to be getting married and doing this whole plan when she thought, oh, I was just a fun guy to date. I was already in the planning mode. Once I realized going to seminary, some of the plans I had during college were coming to fruition, and I had planned out not necessarily the church itself, but a lot of what's happening here was a seed germ at that point. Then also, once we move through the rest of this, again, there's some aspects of my personality that can serve me well and can be a dangerous idol. I think I can control an awful lot, even when it goes south. So, for example, with the betrayal of a friend, of a fellow pastor, I was able to successfully guide the church through that. We only lost one other family in light of that betrayal. So I can really rely on a lot of those internal skills, but at the same time, as I mentioned here and at the end of Cornerstone, there's a lot of emotional downturn that can certainly take place. What I encourage you then to do, as as a cohort, as a group, as you share these stories, is what you would do is ask each other questions. What were you thinking here? How do you think this affected you? And because sometimes others will see patterns we won't see ourselves. And so this gives you a little bit of an idea of what is involved and how it works. And so I'll encourage you each to take about 10 minutes to walk us through your life story, and then we'll take a good 15 minutes. It'd be great if we could do more, but because of the numbers, it's going to be a little tight to be able to really delve into this. But this is a great way to begin to understand how the past affects the present and how it affects us as pastors as we're serving.